In the startup ecosystem, the terminology is mostly associated with animal world. Is there an explanation for it?
I mean, animals, I guess, are part of nature. I don't know. I think we're all obsessed about animals in some extent. But I think the unicorn, especially, has been the most known one in the startup and business world over the past years, even before the tech era, but especially after the tech and digitization era, if you'd like. Unicorn had so much significance and has been actually my North Star growing up, even as an entrepreneur in the digital era. So it's the obsession about animals, I'm not too sure why. But the unicorn has definitely been the most substantial one or most important one in the business world. So
you were co-founder of Zebras Unite and you now have Zebras Growth. So why zebras?
Sure,
what does it mean?
I mean, zebras is again another animal that's maybe looks even similar to a unicorn. It's probably one of the newer additions in the animal world of the startup space. So you mentioned Zebras Unite. I'm one of the co-founding members of Zebras Unite. They're a global movement based in the US, but they're a cooperative movement that run globally. A very fast growing one, so if anyone wants to check them out, Zebras Unite, just Google it and you'll find it. And they kind of just defined this new term for a startup that is actually realistic this time. It's not something that's a fantasy, it's not something made up, it's actually something that we really, really need in this era of environmental and social crisis that we're going. So just to give you an example, what does a zebra mean and why even zebra? I mean, zebras are known to be animals that work in or collaborate, and that they go in herds and they don't try to extract from other different areas. So it comes down to also the characteristics of the animal.
So it means that in zebras, purpose and conscience means more than profit and business itself.
For sure. I mean, it flips the model upside down of why we do business in the first place. Do we do business to maximize our profits, which most business schools are teaching until this day, the majority until this day, which I was in that system too, and I learned that you had to start a business to profit maximize. But the zebra world is just flipping it around and saying, actually, the reason you should start a business is to spot a social or environmental issue, or even better said, potential that you can contribute to. So that's the main purpose. Does that mean you can't be profitable? No, not at all. I actually imagine the most profitable companies of tomorrow will be zebras.
Okay, so it is said that zebras start with a personal why. What was yours?
I mean, my personal why, after working in the online marketing world, online advertising world, online performance marketing world specifically as well, and then eventually the venture building world. So where I worked, for example, in a corporate venture builder, trying to create multiple and scale multiple startups at speed that will reach this unicorn status as fast as possible, is that I was so misaligned with that narrative. And actually my purpose was that I spotted such a big opportunity because I saw this huge wave of zebras coming. It's coming, and it's only a matter of months and years until we can really see this mass transformation of our economies. But I saw that, and I spotted though the difference and the gap within how innovative marketing practices are used within the zebra context, and how founders are really struggling to really understand how they should grow and scale their business in the most regenerative and impact-led way, whilst having frameworks that do not fit the new way of doing business. So that's kind of the purpose that I spotted. I wanted to be part of this transformation, and I wanted to help the whole world transform really into this zebra mindset. And my skill set and my experience in marketing kind of fit that narrative, if you'd like. So my mission now is to co-define what regenerative marketing means.
What does it mean?
Well, I could probably talk hours, but maybe Margot, you can explain and maybe start with the North Star and the purpose, right?
Yeah, so in terms of, we are talking about our reason of starting and being. My personal reason has a lot to do with looking at the huge challenges that we are facing and the uncertainty futures, for sure, that we are going to face very different problems and strange problems. And solutions come from, of course, purpose-led innovation, but also from how can we creatively look at things and solve those problems. We need creative teams that are much more focused on regenerative cycles. They are much more focused on learning fast, on adapting, on unraveling new outcomes, instead of just having this creative agenda that it's really isolated from the rest of the ecosystem, or even from the true essence of the brands. So that was my purpose. And this also connects a bit with the purpose-led environment in business, how we have to balance our North Star and our performance objectives and our profitability, with also really being meaningful in what are we providing, which needs of society, of the planet, people, social problems, any kind of problems. What needs are we really meeting or not? Why do we exist? Is our brand really thinking ahead and thinking how we can provide a different solution without taking something back? Which for now, it feels much that every time we try to give something, we have to take a lot back. And that's why maybe sustainability as a model, it's not enough right now. And that's why we have to look very seriously into regenerative models. And I think that's the base of it.
100%.
Well, why do you say that sustainability model is not enough?
Because creating, in a certain way, sustainability, this is almost kind of philosophical, I know, but sustainability, it's the act of sustain. If we go to the word itself, the word that we chose, and sustain is mostly to stop, to try to decrease speed. So if we stop what we are doing wrong right now, it's not enough. We will not get there. So we need not only to stop and to sustain, but we need to embrace new cycles that nature has taught us for so many centuries about regeneration. And we have to look at it as a really combined, interconnected ecosystems, and not in an isolated way. We look at, when we talk about sustainability, we tend to look at a system, and we look at the resources, the waste, and everything in a circle, but only inside this ecosystem. We have to open up and connect it to all those other ecosystems and understand what is his role in all the contexts, and embrace that all the context is always changing and it's always in movement. So how can, and this is of course a challenge in itself, how can a brand really look at herself, find her essence, her true reason of being, but then position herself as a partner in this very global movement of regeneration, that it's also always in cycles, non-linear cycles, and try to be part of that in a positive way, with a positive outcome for both, for the brand and of course for the positive impact that it wants to create.
So this is a new mindset. It is born in the zebra's ecosystem, but how can it contagiate or spread into the more conventional and established brands and companies? Because in order to regenerate, we need all the economic players, right?
Yeah.
How can it spread?
I think even in more traditional companies, as we might call it, there are some things that really need, fundamental things that need to change. And I think at the core, the three main things maybe should be: one, interconnectivity. They really need to look around and see partnership opportunities, collaborations. They need to look at all the business tissue that is around them, and all the businesses that already maybe even share some kind of purpose with them or the reason of being, and try to understand, okay, how can we do this together, instead of each trying to just look at her small impact. Then the second one has to do maybe with decision making and the process of decision making and where it lands in terms of leadership. So we have this very traditional decision making in leaderships that are on top. And of course, it's very normal that when the decision making is at a level of a financial level or administrative level, only those needs are getting met in the decision process. But when you open the leadership to much more spread out levels and functional levels, other needs are naturally gonna arise in the decision process. And other needs, social needs, ecological needs, that really have an impact, first of all, on people who are involved with the brand and with the business, and then, of course, mimicking to all the society. So the decision making being much low level and spread around, and this also takes courage to understand that leadership is not something so formal, institutionalized, but something that you really, it's an holistic way of looking at leadership. It's a movement, organic. It rises when needed. So it responds to needs. And then the third one has, I think, really to do with just really knowing what it is the outcome that you want to, that you are willing to work for. What is the positive impact? And not just what is that I can measure easily, because sometimes we go for, oh, if I can measure easily, that will be my outcome. But maybe that outcome, what is the real impact that that outcome has? So have the courage to look at it in a most honest way. What am I trying to achieve, not for this generation, but in the future? What is the outcome of my brand on the 7th generations ahead?
Okay.
So,
yeah, a big challenge, right?
Definitely a big challenge. Maybe you can also add, I mean, we talk with big brands all the time, as well as very small brands. And one very high level thing, because I agree with everything that Margot said, but what I'd like to add is that we've went through it. Brands have went through a digitization transformation period. And there's still brands lagging behind, and they're the ones dying off right now.
Yeah.
And we're just going through it again now with regeneration. We're entering the era of regeneration, and that also means for bigger brands that there's a lot of unlearning to do. Whether it's what's the purpose of branding? Is it to paint a picture and manipulate your audience? Or is it to really understand your true reason of being and your true essence, and creating values that can describe your ethical framework and how you make decisions, not just you as a leader, but how every single human being involved in your organization can make decisions. So we need to relook at what branding even means. We need to then look at intention. Intention, without this intention and recognition that we need to unlearn. We need to unlearn what we were taught in business school. We need to unlearn what the system has forced us to, to focus on, which is to compete, and always look for more. Always look for more exponential growth, which nothing in nature achieves aside of humans until we kill ourselves. So that's what Margot said, definitely. There's new companies just like Google who are starting from scratch, and they're going to be the winners of this race, if you'd like, even though it's less of a race, finally. It's actually a very friendly, collaborative, let's heal together. So that's even not comparable, because there's so many negative connotations with the whole digitization era. This is digitization 4.0, just like the Forced Revolution. I can't remember exactly who wrote that book. I need to quote them. But in that sense, that fourth generation, it's the digitization where impact becomes the priority, and healing and regeneration becomes the priority over everything else. And everything else are tools. So profit, revenue, technology, data, everything else are tools to get us to healing. And that's the future I see for our economy.
And going back to the zebra universe, purpose is not enough.
No.
You need to have funding.
Yes.
How do you attract investors? Do you rely mainly in the crowdfunding, the model, or are there any other tools in order to attract investment?
So I mentioned maybe one of the biggest barriers to this transformation of our economies, which is, people need to unlearn and change. So even the new founders founding Zebras, they need to unlearn and change a lot. Now, this is a big barrier, but that's not the only thing. The other big thing is finance. There are no financial instruments at the minute, or they're just getting invented at the minute as we speak, on how to finance this new wave of zebras, of this new wave of regenerative startups that don't grow exponentially forever, but grow exponentially sometimes at the starts, depending on the business model, and then eventually flatten off their growth curve. So they have a limit of their growth. And this does not fit with any financial instrument that is related to a VC world, for example. Okay. So no smart VC would ever invest in a truly regenerative business because it doesn't work. It's not worth their time or money. And no business who is a regenerative founder would ever want to accept, and we've had so many consultations with people saying, I've got 3 offers from VCs, but I can't take them. They're going to change my business, they're going to make it not regenerative. And that's true, because the terms don't reflect the intentions. Even if they're, and I'm saying this about 95% of impact VCs, they have still old governance models of traditional, unicorn VCs, which just aren't aligned with how the new zebras need to grow, and need to grow in a most long approached regenerative. Now, there are alternatives. There is things like grant funding from governments, which I think Portugal is going to increase on, which we're seeing in the whole European Union increasing on. Germany is getting a lot of funding right now in social investment and social models. Again, these are all these are short-term fixes, if you'd like, of the problem, which is great, and we need more of them. There's a wave of alternative angel investors that are now approaching things like revenue-based, financing models. So instead of saying they're going to take shares, they're just going to take, for the next 10 years, 10% of your annual revenue. And if you fail, you fail, just like there's any risk for investment. But that's a whole different approach of why you'd invest in a company. And the main reason it's, yes, you need to be revenue generating and profitable to be able to get investment from those. But if the main North Star is not impact and regeneration, those investors won't even be interested in investing. So that's the new breed of investors, if you'd like. They're categorized as alternative finance or alternative capital. And those are one of many, right? So there are ones that are focusing on capped interest share, for example. So how can we get some interest, but at a cap, and with a plan to reduce and eventually remove ourselves from your business? As you probably saw, Patagonia just became student-owned, and everyone's talking about it in the sustainability world. They've spent a lot of money to make that even possible, which comes into the third. So finance is the second. The third is governance. There is no, and what Margot was explaining, the decentralized, basically, decision-making with solid ethical frameworks when we talk about the brand. If we have more, decentralized systems and governance models, like what Patagonia is trying to do, where actually the whole purpose is to put the stewardship or the responsibility of every single employee down into the purpose. And the purpose has to be regenerative and healing. So if every single employee, and what does that mean in reality? That means every single employee has an ownership right to vote, and gets dividends in some scenarios.
Once again, collaboration.
Collaboration, co-creation, because we don't know what we're doing, even in the regeneration world. Like I'm saying, 95% of impact investors, 95% don't know what they're doing, and I heard and had discussions with them in panels and in conferences weeks ago, them saying we're very early on, we don't know what we're doing. So the biggest brands, one tip is, please don't say that you know what you're doing, because the biggest innovators in this space have no clue what they're doing.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Lisbon has just launched a unicorn factory. Mm-hmm. Should we have Zebra's Farm, so to say?
For sure. Everywhere is a good place for a zebra's farm, if you ask me. I guess Lisbon has, even not just Lisbon, but Portugal as a country has this very strong heritage as a production, and looking, and even in terms of the country itself, the means and the resources it has. It is a very privileged country, so to speak, in terms of even all this innovation, tech innovation that we are tracking, and also in social resources. We have a lot of very good professionals and thinkers and forward thinkers we have from all of our history. So for sure it's a good place for it, and it shows because even you were speaking before about Scotland, how it's really similar in terms of these big hubs, important hubs that are now very innovative led and
sustainability innovative as well. So.
Yeah. Because one now cannot be separated from the other, right? If we talk, what's the purpose now of talking about innovation if you are not talking about regenerative-led or sustainability-led innovation? There's no point on building more things or just thinking forward without trying to tackle these challenges.
Do you think there's awareness to that relation so close between sustainability and innovation? Is there the economic issues, society, is there awareness to that?
I think for sure there's a great amount of awareness in the professional side. I think in society it's really starting to also resonate a lot. And we see this in the choices that consumers are making. So those choices scream loud that, people are aware of they want to be able to make better choices in their daily life. But so there's that amount of awareness, even from the consumer side, the professional side for sure. But then there are these blockages that Mo spoke about, which is funding blockages, the support systems from governments, and they are not there yet. So even if we are talking about how good it would be to have this zebra farm, it feels like mostly businesses are still left a bit alone when trying to go that route. And that cannot happen. That also has to change.
Okay, so we are a bit behind in that sense.
I don't know if we are behind.
Maybe what I would like to add is we're not behind. We're actually very natural in the sense that the early adopters are driving this movement forward. So companies like in Lisbon, in the mushroom growing based NAM, for example, those companies and startups that are innovating in our space and all around Portugal and Lisbon, that are using regenerative practices that are, again, like Margot was saying, taking a lot of the Portuguese even heritage and relationship to land and permaculture, for example, and the relationship to the surrounding and applying that in business. Those are the ones leading it. So in Germany, I was visiting a conference by purposeeconomy.org a few months ago, and it was all about steward ownership, and it was co-organized by the innovators in Berlin, which is one of the next European sustainability and regenerative kind of startup hubs of Europe, very similar to actually Lisbon, or close in the race if you'd like. Now they were the ones that started to now involve the government, and there's actually now actual change happening in government law that will hopefully very soon allow new legislations to be released that allow companies to extremely easily and even incentivize them to actually set up steward-owned structures. So structures where, like I said, in this Patagonia scenario, anyone could do that within a few days maybe, or a few weeks, which right now is a huge burden. It's almost impossible, even though there's some businesses that have done it after months of lawyer fees. But what I'm trying to say is it's part of the natural progression, just like the digitization era. We're at the beginning of the internet age, and 3 years ahead, and government is needing to catch up, and investors need to catch up, and they're now slowly realizing it, and the ones leading it are these companies and founders that are early staged and are somehow, most of them, revenue generating actually, and aren't depending on funding to actually survive, because they've had to be extremely efficient and effective with how they survive. So they've actually are more resilient actually than most traditional businesses too, financially. And again, that's another, for me, proof that the future is going to be zebra for sure.
Okay, and we need more zebras. How
Definitely.
to attract them?
I mean, how to attract, it's already in process.
Okay.
And the bar is filling every day. So many more are joining this movement. I think there needs to be more awareness and more storytelling. There's, as I said, we're entering the era of regeneration, but before that, we're also in the middle of the era of greenwashing. And that's very related in the evolution of this. And it's not going to be something that will exist in a few years, because it's just, we are now facing that, the problem, if you'd like. So Sorry, what was the question again?
No, if we need more zebras.
More
and how
zebras,
to
for
track
sure.
them.
I mean, for sure. The greenwashing, like I said, so now more than ever, consumers are on the lookout for what a brand truly is doing and if they're truly behind their word. And if they see any sustainability mark or regeneration or anything along those lines or trying to create an impact, which right now the majority of corporates are saying, and they don't really live by it, then they're not going to be considered. It's going to be a very different world, a very different consumer market, which is already transforming right now. So do we need more? 100%. We need more of the existing ones to transform, because we're not saying that they can't transform, just like many have went through the digitization era and have became one of the 4 leaders in this tech world, right? Kind of era that we're in. But now they all need to transform, and the ones that don't transform are also losing out. And also, if you haven't noticed, we're burning down our world. So that's one of many, many, many problems that we're facing and urgent needs of us as society and as humanity that we've been ignoring for the past 10 to 20 years. So do we need more? Yes, of course. We need the future of the whole economy to be zebra-led.
Okay. And speaking of transformation, could a zebra become an unicorn?
It can. Will a zebra ever aim to become a unicorn? No, because then it's not a zebra. So if your goal is to become a $1 billion valuated company, which is a definition of what a unicorn is, which is something that has been created to fit in financial markets rather than in our societies, then you will never be a zebra, because that goes fundamentally against the concept of being a zebra. Are there zebras that are valued are $1 billion? Yes, there are a few out there even today. I can't mention now on the top of my head. Okay. I might send you that later on.
But they're still zebras?
They're still zebras, of course. They can be profitable. Like I said, I think the most profitable companies of tomorrow will be zebras, and we're still figuring out how that looks like. I mean, us at Zebra Growth, we're starting to just co-define what regenerative marketing even looks like, and we're maybe at 2 to 5% of that. So there's a learning curve that we're going through, but yes, the future of zebras will be the unicorns of tomorrow.